Hello everybody! In this acoustic guitar lesson I'm going to teach you all about hammer-ons. We'll cover what hammer-ons are, how you play them, where you can use them, and not least why they're important. And that's actually what I want to start with. Why are hammer-ons important? Well, I use them all the time in my own playing to embellish chords and in my lead playing. But don't just take it from me. Here's the start of one of the most well-known acoustic guitar riffs ever. Now, I'm sure you've already recognised that that's the start of the riff for Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, and the third note of that riff is a hammer-on. So it just embellishes that riff, it just makes it sound a bit different and a bit better. If I were to play that riff without the hammer-on, well, you can still recognise it, but it's not quite the same with the hammer-on. It's just that much better. Okay, let's start then by looking at what a hammer-on is. Now, I used the example of that hammer-on at the beginning of the Wish You Were Here riff. Now, that hammer-on is taking us from a note of A on the 5th string open to a note of B on the 5th string 2nd fret. And usually, if we wanted to play those two notes, that would mean we'd use our right hand to play the A string, the 5th string, twice, while going from open to our index finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. The difference with a hammer-on is that we only use our right hand for the first of those two notes, in this case the open A string. So we play that once, and then we simply use our left hand to hammer on to the 2nd fret to get that B note. So a hammer-on, the clue is in the name really. It's quite a sort of forceful use of the left hand fingers to make a second note after you've already played the first note with your right hand. So that's a good example, that Wish You Were Here riff. So that's what a hammer-on is. It's simply playing a second note after you've plucked the first note, but on the second note you're not going to pluck it with your right hand, you're producing the force that makes the note just with your left hand. So the mechanics of hammering on are fairly simple really, but there are one or two guidelines that it's worth bearing in mind as you do hammer-ons, which will improve them a bit and enable you to avoid some common pitfalls. So the first one is you don't have to hammer on from very far up. If you think about it, you might be hammering on in the context of a chord. So your finger doesn't have to move very far, it has to move with some force, but not very far. Don't have to do this, just this. The second thing, and I think this is crucial not just for hammer-ons but for a lot of guitar playing, is the positioning of your finger on your left hand against the fret. And generally it should be, your finger should be snug just up against the fret there. So here we're hammering on to the 2nd fret and we should be not on the fret but just behind the metal fret. Just like that there. That's the sweet spot of the fret. Now, if I move my finger back so it's just next to the previous fret, then we get a buzzy sound. And that buzzy sound is generated by the string vibrating against the metal of the 2nd fret. We don't want that buzzy sound. So when you're hammering on, make sure your finger lands in the sweet spot just next to the target fret, which in this case is the 2nd fret there. So that is always important. Where you put your fingers, your placement on the frets, you always want them to be snug against the fret. Always important for guitaring, but particularly important for hammering on. Let's look at where we can use hammer-ons then, and I tend to use them a lot to make my playing of chords more interesting, to spice it up. And so I'm going to show you some examples of hammer-ons with some common chords, and we'll start with G major. So you've already seen that the introduction to Wish You Were Here uses a hammer-on from G major. Okay, and that's hammering onto the 2nd fret at the 5th string from open. Now, when I play G major, I tend to finger it like this with my middle finger, ring finger, and little finger. And one of the reasons I do that is it gives you the opportunity to play a lot of hammer-ons. So you can use your middle finger to hammer on from open to the 2nd fret on the 5th string, the 4th string, and the 3rd string. They'll all work. You can also use your index finger to hammer on to the 2nd string 1st fret there. Do hammer that on, that's the a note of C, which is the 4th note of G, so that's making a G suspended 4th, a G sus4. That's lovely. Now, at the same time as hammering on your index finger to the 2nd string 1st fret, you can also simultaneously hammer your middle finger onto the 4th string 2nd fret. That makes a G over C chord. Not only that, but another variation is that at the same time as hammering your index finger onto the 2nd string 1st fret, you can hammer your middle finger onto the 3rd string 2nd fret. And that gives you a sort of suspended G come D7. And of course you can do all of those hammer-ons. I'm going to show you some hammer-ons for C major and D major in just a moment, but before I do that, if you've been enjoying this lesson, please do hit the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe, because then you'll be notified of all the future videos that I release. Let's look at the C chord next then. So with the C chord, my favourite hammer-on, or at least the one that I use the most for the C chord, is actually to just take my middle finger off of the 4th string and then hammer it back onto the 2nd fret 4th string. Do that quite a lot, probably too much. But there are some other nice ones. So another nice one is if you take your little finger there and you hammer it onto the 4th string 3rd fret. So that's a note of F, your little finger's on a note of F there on the 4th string 3rd fret. So again, that's the 4th note up from C, so that makes this into a C sus4. That's a nice one. The other thing you can do, or one other thing you can do anyway, is if you remove your index finger from the 2nd string, that gives us a C major 9th, because that's the note of B there, that 2nd string open. Hammering back on to the 2nd string 1st fret with your index finger is giving you a regular C. Quite nice as well. So there are some options on your C chord. When it comes to the D chord, quite a lot of the common hammer-ons that are used revolve around the top string. So let me show you those first. Now, first of all, if you remove your middle finger from the top string 2nd fret so that the top string's open, that gives you a D2 chord, a D with an E in it, because that top string open is E. And then if you hammer your middle finger back on to the top string 2nd fret, you get a regular D chord again. So we can do that one. Also on the top string, if you take your little finger and you hammer it onto top string 3rd fret, that's a D sus4 because that's the note of G that your little finger is hammering onto there, which is the 4th of D. And of course you can do both those hammer-ons, one after the other. They sound nice. So those are the most common D hammer-ons, but there are some others which are kind of interesting. So one other one that you can do is if you take your index finger off of the 3rd string, so that's open, and then you can hammer it back on to 3rd string 2nd fret there. It's quite a nice one. If you really want to get ornate with the D chord, start playing around really with using your index finger on the 4th string 2nd fret and your little finger on the 4th string 4th fret. You can also put your little finger on the 4th fret of the 3rd string as well. There's interesting stuff you can do there, and that works with the D chord as well. So that's hammering your index finger onto 5th string 2nd fret from open. So there's loads of things you can do with the D chord. Now I've given you some examples of some hammer-ons that will work for 3 of the most common chords: G major, C major and D major. But actually what you'll find is that for most open chords, if you take one of your fingers off and then you hammer it back on again, usually you'll get a nice sound. So let's try some common open chords and we'll try that. So here's A minor, and I'm going to try hammering on each of the 3 fingers I use in turn. Pretty much works. Here's E minor. Let's try hammering those 2 fingers on in turn. Pretty good. And then D minor. So I didn't like that one too much, but the other 2, my middle finger and my index finger, pretty good. So just work your way through the open chords and experiment. Take fingers off, put them back on again as you're playing your chords. And you'll probably find your favourite hammer-ons.